So today I want to discuss something that I believe is the biggest financial scandal in human history. Not one of the biggest. The biggest, and I say that with full confidence because when you see the numbers I am about to show you, when you understand where the money actually goes, you will realize that the American people have been robbed. Not figuratively, not metaphorically, robbed literally for decades. Everyone talks about America's military budget, $886 billion per year, the largest military budget in the world, larger than the next 10 countries combined. And when Americans hear that number, they feel safe. They think, $886 billion. We must have the most powerful military on earth. Nobody can touch us. But here is the question nobody asks. Where does that money actually go? Not where does the Pentagon say it goes. Where does it actually go? Because those are two very different things. And the answer is going to make you furious, because the answer is that nobody knows. Not the Pentagon, not Congress, not the president, not the American people. Nobody knows where $2 trillion of American military spending has gone. It has simply disappeared. $2 trillion, vanished, unaccounted for. And nobody has been arrested. Nobody has been fired. Nobody has been held accountable. In any other country on earth, this would be called what it is, the greatest theft in human history. In America, it is called the defense budget. So let me walk you through this. First, I'm going to show you the documented evidence of the missing money. Not my opinion, the Pentagon's own audits. Second, I'm going to show you where the money actually goes. The contracts, the cost overruns, the revolving door between the Pentagon and defense contractors. Third, I am going to show you how this directly connects to why America is losing this war against Iran. And fourth, I am going to show you why no politician in America will ever fix this problem. Because the system is designed to be unfixable. Let us begin. First, the audit, because I want to start with facts. Hard, documented, undeniable facts. In 1990, the United States Congress passed a law called the Chief Financial Officers Act. This law required every federal agency, including the Department of Defense, to undergo an independent financial audit every year. Every agency, every year. The purpose was simple: account for the taxpayers' money. Show where it goes. Prove that it was spent legally and appropriately. Every other federal agency complied. The Department of Agriculture passed its audit. The Department of Commerce passed its audit. The Department of Education passed its audit. Even the Department of Homeland Security, which was created after 9/11 and had enormous growing pains, eventually passed its audit. The Department of Defense, the Pentagon has never passed an audit. Never, not once, in 34 years. The largest single expenditure of the United States government, $886 billion per year, has never been able to account for where its money goes. Let me say that again, because I want you to absorb this. For 34 years, the Pentagon has been legally required to show where it spends taxpayer money. And for 34 years, it has failed. Every single year. Failed. The Pentagon did not even attempt its first audit until 2018. 28 years after the law was passed. And when it finally did attempt an audit, it failed. Catastrophically, the auditors found that the Pentagon's financial records were so disorganized, so incomplete, so riddled with errors that they could not even determine how many assets the Pentagon owned, where those assets were located, or how much had been spent on them. And the number that came out of these failed audits, the number that should have led to criminal investigations, congressional hearings, and mass firings, $2.3 trillion in unsupported adjustments. That is the Pentagon's own language. Unsupported adjustments. It means $2.3 trillion in transactions that cannot be explained, cannot be documented, cannot be traced to any specific purchase, contract, or expenditure. $2.3 trillion. That is not a rounding error. That is not an accounting mistake. That is more than the entire GDP of India, more than the entire GDP of France, more than the entire GDP of the United Kingdom. Gone, unaccounted for, and nobody has been held responsible. Now, some defenders of the Pentagon will say, well, this does not mean the money was stolen. It just means the accounting systems are outdated, the records are messy. The Pentagon is a large organization. And to that I say, exactly. That is exactly the point. The Pentagon has had 34 years and hundreds of billions of dollars in IT upgrades to fix its accounting systems, and it has not done it. Why? Because messy accounting is not a bug, it is a feature. You cannot steal what you cannot track. And the Pentagon's financial system is deliberately designed, to be untrackable. Now, let me show you where the money that can be tracked actually goes. Because even the money we can see is scandalous. The defense budget breaks down roughly like this. About 25% goes to military personnel, salaries, benefits, housing. About 25% goes to operations and maintenance, fuel, training, base operations. About 25% goes to procurement, buying weapons, vehicles, ships, aircraft. And about 25% goes to research, development, and other categories. Now, the personnel costs and operations costs are relatively straightforward. Soldiers get paid, bases need electricity, aircraft need fuel. These are real expenses. The scandal is in procurement, the buying of weapons, because this is where the military-industrial complex extracts its profit, and the profit margins are extraordinary. Let me give you specific examples, documented examples, from government audits and investigative reports. The F-35 Joint Strike Fighter. I have talked about this before, but I want to go deeper. The F-35 program was originally estimated to cost $233 billion in total. Today, the estimated lifetime cost is $1.7 trillion. That is a cost overrun of over 600%. 600%. In any private business, a 600% cost overrun would result in someone being fired. In the Pentagon, it results in more funding. But here is the detail that nobody discusses. Lockheed Martin, the primary contractor for the F-35, operates on what is called a cost-plus contract. This means that Lockheed Martin is guaranteed a profit margin on top of whatever the program costs. If the program costs more, Lockheed Martin makes more money. Read that again. The more expensive the program becomes, the more profit the contractor earns. This is insanity. This is a system that incentivizes cost overruns, that rewards failure, that punishes efficiency. Because if Lockheed Martin built the F-35 on time and on budget, it would make less money than if the program is late and over budget. And so, the program is late and over budget every time, without exception. The Boeing KC-46 tanker aircraft. This is a refueling plane. Its job is to fly around and refuel other aircraft mid-flight. Not exactly cutting-edge technology. We have been doing aerial refueling since the 1950s. The original contract was for $4.9 billion for 179 aircraft. The current estimated cost, over $7 billion, and the aircraft still has serious defects. Its remote vision system, which allows the operator to see the refueling boom, produces blurred and distorted images. The aircraft has been restricted from refueling certain types of aircraft because of safety concerns. $7 billion for a tanker that cannot safely refuel all aircraft. And Boeing has received billions in additional payments for fixes that should have been included in the original contract. The Littoral Combat Ship. This was supposed to be a cheap, fast, versatile warship. Estimated cost, $220 million per ship. Actual cost, $500 million per ship. The ships were so unreliable that the Navy began retiring them after less than 5 years of service. Multiple ships experienced engine failures, structural cracks, and combat system failures. The Navy built 35 of these ships at a total cost of approximately $17.5 billion, and now it is scrapping them. $17.5 billion, thrown away. But here is what makes it truly criminal. The companies that built these defective ships, Lockheed Martin and Austal USA, were not penalized. They were not sued. They were not held accountable. They kept the money, all of it. And they received contracts for new ships to replace the ones that failed. In the defense industry, failure is not punished. Failure is rewarded with more contracts to fix the failure. And then, when the fix fails, more contracts to fix the fix. It is an endless cycle of spending that enriches the contractor and bankrupts the taxpayer. Now, I want to show you something that I think is the most insidious part of the entire system, the revolving door. The revolving door is the practice of senior Pentagon officials leaving government service and immediately taking high-paying jobs at the defense contractors they were supposed to be overseeing, and defense industry executives leaving their companies to take senior positions at the Pentagon where they award contracts to their former employers. This is not a secret, it is documented, it is legal, and it is devastatingly corrupt. Let me give you some examples. The Secretary of Defense, the person who runs the entire American military, the person who decides which weapons to buy, which contracts to award, which companies to fund. In recent decades, multiple secretaries of defense have come directly from the defense industry or gone directly to the defense industry after leaving office. Lloyd Austin, who was Secretary of Defense, sat on the board of Raytheon before becoming secretary. Raytheon is one of the largest defense contractors in the world. They make the Patriot missile system, the Tomahawk cruise missile, and dozens of other weapons. Austin was making hundreds of thousands of dollars per year from Raytheon, and then he became the person responsible for deciding how many Raytheon missiles to buy. Mark Esper, another former Secretary of Defense, was the Chief Government Relations Officer at Raytheon before becoming secretary. His job at Raytheon was literally to lobby the Pentagon for contracts, and then he became the head of the Pentagon. This is not an exception, this is the norm. Senior generals retire and immediately join defense company boards. Pentagon procurement officials leave and become executives at the companies they were negotiating with. Congressional staff members who work on military appropriations leave Capitol Hill and become lobbyists for defense firms. The system is designed so that the people making the decisions about how to spend $886 billion per year are the same people who profit from those decisions, before, during, or after their government service. In any other context, this would be called bribery. In Washington, it is called public service. Now let me show you the small-scale theft, because while the big contracts get occasional media attention, the small-scale waste is equally stunning, and it adds up to billions. The Pentagon pays $1,280 for a single coffee cup, not a special coffee cup, not a high-technology coffee cup, a cup that heats liquid on military aircraft, $1,280. The Pentagon pays $640 for a toilet seat on a military aircraft, $640. The Pentagon pays $435 for a hammer, not a laser-guided smart hammer, a hammer, $435. The Pentagon pays $7,622 for a coffee maker, for brewing coffee, $7,622. Now, defenders of the Pentagon will say these prices are justified because of military specifications. Military equipment has to meet certain standards. It has to be durable. It has to work in extreme conditions. Fine. I accept that military equipment costs more than civilian equipment, but 50 times more, 100 times more, a coffee cup that costs $1,280 when you can buy a perfectly functional cup for $10? The reason for these absurd prices is the procurement system itself. Military contracts are awarded through a complex bureaucratic process that adds layers of administrative cost, compliance cost, and profit margin at every step. By the time a hammer reaches a military base, it has passed through multiple contractors, subcontractors, compliance officers, and logistics companies. Each one takes a cut, each one adds a markup. The system is designed to maximize the number of intermediaries and the size of their margins. It is not designed to deliver value to the taxpayer or capability to the soldier. And these small overcharges add up to billions of dollars per year in inflated prices for ordinary items. Billions that could have been spent on actual military capability, on interceptor missiles, on drone defense, on the things that soldiers actually need to survive. Now, here is where I connect all of this to the war in Iran, because this is not just a story about financial corruption. This is a story about why America is losing a war. Every dollar that goes to a $1,280 coffee cup is a dollar that did not go to a PAC-3 interceptor missile. Every billion that goes to a defective littoral combat ship is a billion that did not go to drone defense systems. Every $1.7 trillion that goes to an F-35 that does not work as promised is $1.7 trillion that did not go to the cheap, effective, mass-produced weapons that America actually needs. The military-industrial complex has drained the American military of its actual fighting capability. It has taken $886 billion per year and converted it into shareholder profits, executive bonuses, lobbyist fees, and overpriced coffee cups. And what is left for the actual fighting? Not enough. Not enough interceptor missiles, not enough drones, not enough ammunition, not enough spare parts, not enough production capacity, not enough of anything that matters in a real war. America spends more on its military than the next 10 countries combined, and it is running out of missiles in 2 weeks against Iran. That tells you everything you need to know about where the money goes. Iran spends approximately $25 billion per year on its military, about 3% of what America spends. And Iran has enough drones, missiles, and asymmetric capabilities to fight this war for months, perhaps years, because Iran's military spending goes to weapons, actual weapons, cheap, effective, mass-produced weapons that work. Iran does not have a military-industrial complex. Iran has a military, and there is a very important difference. America's military exists to serve the defense industry. Iran's military exists to defend Iran. And in a war, the military that exists to actually fight will always outperform the military that exists to generate revenue. Now, I want to show you why this problem cannot be fixed. And this is perhaps the most depressing part of the entire analysis. Because some of you are thinking, well, just fix the system, elect better politicians, reform the procurement process, hold contractors accountable. And I wish it were that simple. But it is not. And here is why. The defense industry spends more on lobbying than any other industry in America. In 2024 alone, the top 5 defense companies spent over $60 million on lobbying. That does not include campaign contributions. That does not include political action committees. That does not include the dark money that flows through nonprofit organizations and think tanks. Every member of Congress who sits on the Armed Services Committee or the Appropriations Committee receives campaign contributions from defense contractors. Every single one. Republican and Democrat, there is no partisan divide on this issue. Both parties feed from the same trough. And here is the mechanism that makes it impossible to cut. Defense contracts are deliberately spread across as many congressional districts as possible. The F-35 program has suppliers in 45 out of 50 states. This is not efficient manufacturing. This is political insurance. Because if the F-35 has suppliers in 45 states, then 90 senators have constituents whose jobs depend on the F-35 program. And no senator will vote to cut a program that employs voters in their state. This is why the F-35 program continues despite being $1.5 trillion over budget. This is why the littoral combat ship program continued despite producing ships that do not work. This is why the Pentagon budget grows every year despite never passing an audit. The system is designed to be unfixable. The money flows to the contractors. The contractors hire the lobbyists. The lobbyists fund the politicians. The politicians approve the budget. The budget flows to the contractors. And the cycle repeats. Year after year, decade after decade, and anyone who tries to break the cycle is destroyed. Politicians who question military spending are accused of being weak on defense. Generals who challenge procurement decisions are passed over for promotion. Whistleblowers who expose waste are fired, harassed, or prosecuted. The system protects itself like a living organism, like a parasite that has attached itself to the body of American democracy and will not let go. Now, let me give you the historical perspective, because this pattern of military corruption leading to military defeat is not new. The Roman Empire. In the late Roman Empire, the military became increasingly dependent on mercenaries and private contractors. Roman generals became more interested in personal wealth than military effectiveness. Military equipment was produced by corrupt contractors who cut corners and delivered inferior products. Roman soldiers went into battle with substandard weapons and armor. And when the barbarians came, the Roman military could not stop them. Not because Rome lacked resources. Rome was still enormously wealthy, but because the resources were being siphoned by the military-political complex of the late empire, the money went to corruption instead of capability, and the empire fell. The Ottoman Empire. In the 18th and 19th centuries, the Ottoman military became corrupted by a system of patronage and profiteering. Military contracts were awarded based on political connections rather than capability. Officers bought their commissions rather than earning them through merit. Equipment was outdated because modernization would threaten the existing patronage networks. And when the Ottoman Empire faced modern European armies, it was repeatedly defeated. Not because the Ottomans lacked soldiers or resources, but because the system was designed to enrich insiders rather than fight wars. The empire collapsed. The Soviet Union. The Soviet military-industrial complex consumed approximately 25% of Soviet GDP. Enormous resources poured into weapons production, but the system was riddled with corruption, falsified reports, and phantom production numbers. Factories reported producing weapons that did not exist. Generals reported readiness levels that were fictional. The entire system was built on lies. And when the Soviet Union needed to fight in Afghanistan, the reality caught up with the lies. Equipment failed. Supplies ran short. The Afghan War exposed the hollowness of Soviet military power, and within a decade, the Soviet Union collapsed. America is following exactly the same path. An enormous military budget consumed by corruption and profiteering, a system that reports readiness levels that are fictional, a military that looks powerful on paper but cannot sustain a real war, equipment that costs fortunes and does not work, leaders who prioritize careers and contracts over capability and truth. The pattern is clear. Military corruption leads to military hollowness. Military hollowness leads to military defeat. Military defeat leads to imperial collapse. Rome, the Ottomans, the Soviets, and now, America. So let me bring this all together, because I want you to understand the complete picture. America spends $886 billion per year on its military. The Pentagon has never passed an audit. $2.3 trillion is unaccounted for. Defense contractors operate on cost-plus contracts that reward failure. The revolving door ensures that the people overseeing spending are the same people profiting from it. Weapon systems cost 600% more than estimated and arrive decades late with hundreds of unresolved defects. Ordinary items cost 50 to 100 times more than their civilian equivalents. The lobbying system makes reform impossible, and whistleblowers are destroyed. The result? A military that is the most expensive in history and cannot produce enough missiles to fight for more than 2 weeks. A military that retreats from $50,000 drones. A military that has $13 billion aircraft carriers that run away. A military that has $100 million stealth fighters that get detected. And on the other side, Iran, $25 billion per year, no revolving door, no cost-plus contracts, no $1,280 coffee cups, just weapons, cheap, effective, mass-produced weapons. Drones that cost $30,000, missiles that cost $50,000, tunnels that cost a fraction of one American aircraft carrier. $886 billion versus $25 billion, and the $25 billion military is winning, not because Iran is stronger, but because Iran's money goes to fighting, and America's money goes to stealing. That is the $2 trillion lie. The lie that $886 billion buys you the most powerful military in the world. It does not. It buys you the most expensive military in the world, and there is a very important difference between the most powerful and the most expensive. Iran understands that difference. The American people are about to learn it. Let me leave you with one number: $2.3 trillion, unaccounted for. Enough to have built 575,000 PAC-3 interceptor missiles. Enough to have won this war before it started. Enough to have protected every American base, every American ship, every American soldier. But that money is gone. Nobody knows where it went, and nobody ever will. Because the system is designed that way. And the soldiers, the sailors, the men and women in uniform who believed that their country had their back, they are now discovering that their country spent the money on executive bonuses and $640 toilet seats instead. That is the $2 trillion lie. Okay, I think that is enough for today. Was this interesting? Good. Was this clear? Good. I will see you in the next class.